All right, welcome to another episode of Seeds of Music. I'm your host, Kyle Williams, and this is the #1 web show where aspiring independent artists, producers, bands, and musicians can learn right now how to find their market, gain exposure, and effectively grow their fan base. Today's episode, we have Ian Gibson from iangibson.com on the show. And the really cool thing about Ian is that not only is he a session musician, but he's also a licensed attorney. And what he does is he helps musicians navigate the legal minefield that presents itself whenever you're trying to copyright music or basically deal with any kind of legal matters when you're a musician. We're going to learn mostly about copyright, how much it costs to copyright a song, a beat, or a lyric, and how you really are supposed to go about doing that. He's also going to dispel one particular myth that everybody has about being able to copyright something on the super cheap end. That actually was really awesome that he brought that up, because it was something that I fell for, and everybody else I know thought you could do it too. So stay tuned, you'll find out exactly what that is. All right, welcome to another episode of Seeds of Music. On the show today, we have Ian Gibson on the show with us, who is a really unique combination of musician and law. So, and specifically, we're talking about things that we need to know as in the music business, such as copyright law. So, Ian, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Kyle. Happy to be here.
Excellent. So, legal stuff, okay, legal jargon, law, it's not exactly, I'll just be frank, it's not exactly the most exciting thing on the planet or easy to understand. So, especially for people who create music, whether they're in a band or they're a producer. So, what are some absolute essentials to know as far as like copywriting music or beats or songs, like some really simple, essential things that they need to know?
So first, I feel your pain. There was a period where, if I read about the law, my eyes would start to glaze over too. And I think that's common. So no offense taken. And I definitely want to keep this to just the most succinct, relevant, takeaway, actual tactical advice we can, because I don't think anyone here is really signing up for the history of copyright law. They want to know, what can I do today, immediately, to protect my music? So that's absolutely the sort of advice that I want to give. And I think, this discussion, I think we're going to focus on copyright law, which is hands down one of the most relevant areas in the law for musicians. After all, if you are a professional musician, I think you owe it to yourself to at least understand some of the basics. So you understand how you can license certain uses of your music, when you might be crossing a line and infringing someone else, and what to do if you identify someone who may have infringed you.
So what would be one like huge thing about copyright that musicians and producers should know? Would it be just understanding what copyright is, or how to obtain it?
I think that they should have an understanding of what it is, but I'll just give it to you. The one takeaway, if you're going to learn a single thing in this video, it is you need to file a copyright registration with the Copyright Office for your music. And doing so opens up this world of benefits that you only get if you register your work, and if you register your work timely. So I can explain what timely means. Under the current Copyright Act, from the first date of publication of a song, so essentially when you release a song, you have 3 months to file a registration for that song and to still receive all the maximum benefits. Alternatively, if it's not too late for those of you who haven't filed a registration yet, you can file registration now, and as long as that registration is filed before an infringement of your work occurs, you'll still get all those same benefits. What are the
benefits exactly that they can get?
So probably the best way to explain this is with an example. So let's say that you and I co-wrote a song, re-released it today, and we didn't file a copyright registration, and a big name artist infringed that work at some point in the future, and we found out about it. So at that point, we have some copyright protections that are given automatically, and we can talk more about that later, as soon as this creative expression is recorded. But in terms of what we can sue for, the sorts of remedies or the available benefits, if you want to think of it that way, for the copyright owner, changes dramatically whether we filed a registration or not. So if we haven't, we can seek what's called actual damages, and that's just fancy lawyer speak for you can take some of the infringer's profits away.
Okay.
So just to try and make a real simple example, if the song that we co-wrote, say just the chorus was copied by that big name artist, then we would use accountants to figure out what percentage of that big name artist's song we could attribute to our work, and what percentage of the profits of that big artist's song we could attribute to them copying our work, and come up with some kind of a mathematical figure that we could apply to their profits that could come back to us as copyright owners. Now, if we had filed a registration, we still get that option. And if you're infringed by a big name artist, that might be the best option to use. But if it's not a big name artist, not one that has this really large amount of potential profits to disgorge, you have this alternative approach, which is called statutory damages. And that's a term that references this spectrum of dollar figures. It's actually laid out in the Copyright Act. It's in black and white. Okay. That depending on how willful an infringement was, you might fall on this low end, which I believe is maybe as low as $200, on up to the high end for willful infringements, which can be as high as $150,000 per work infringed. Okay. And it's that $150,000 per work infringed figure that often comes up in the news. So if you remember a few years back, all these peer-to-peer file sharing cases surrounding music. Yeah. And the classic story would be, a 12-year-old gets sued for a couple $1 million or something absurd like that, right?
From Metallica.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the way that they get that number, I think a lot of people read these headlines and scratch their head and think, this is absurd. How could you come up with this massive dollar figure? It's because they're probably taking that $150,000 figure from the Copyright Act and multiplying it by the number of songs that were downloaded. So that's kind of just to make it real world. That's probably how they arrived at those massive numbers that they were requesting in the beginning.
Okay. So so it's clear that after you publish a song, if you want to be protected, as far as financially in the future for someone else, because you might not make the artist might not make a lot of money off that song, but someone else could take the idea and make profits from it. So you have that 3-month window, you said, to register it with the Copyright Office in order to protect profits in the future. Is that kind of just the basics of it?
Yeah, I think the basics of it are register your work within 3 months of first publication or prior to infringement to receive the maximum protection under the Copyright Act.
Okay. And what steps do we have to take to register with the Copyright Office? How exactly do you do that?
So some people hire lawyers to assist them, or document preparer companies to assist them with registration. But you don't need to do that. This is something that musicians can do a little bit of homework on and save a lot of money potentially in doing it themselves. So no matter who is filing the registration, ultimately it's going to go to the same place, and that's the U.S. Copyright Office. Mm-hmm. And the way that I personally interface with the Copyright Office is through copyright.gov. So if you go there, there are several options. If you want to use a paper form to file your copyright registration application and actually include a CD with an audio file, that's one way you can do it. Or you can use what's called the Electronic Copyright Office, the ECO, to file everything electronically. And it's through that electronic filing process that I file most of the copyright registrations that I work on.
Okay. And they just pretty much, it's up to everyone to go to those sites and follow the instructions there in order to submit. Is there any money involved? I mean, how much do you have to pay to register? And
Great question. So yes, there are some instructions on copyright.gov, and I recommend that everyone read them because it can be kind of deceptively complicated. Now, for some people,
it's a no-brainer. It's not complicated.
Right. And the law. When has that ever been a trouble?
Yeah.
So I think that for some people, it might be a no-brainer, really easy to file. So say, for example, you are the singer-songwriter, you wrote everything yourself, there's no co-authors on the work, you own the work, and you're publishing the work on a certain date, and you know what that date is, filling out this form is probably not going to be too difficult for you.
Okay.
Now, if you have a different set of circumstances, say you have a number of bandmates that you're writing music with, and tracks 1 through 3 you wrote yourself, 4 through 7 everyone contributed, and maybe one of the tracks is going to be released as a single prior to the album release. Now you've got a more complicated scenario that you should be aware of before filing a registration. So if you have different authors, if you have different publication dates, then you really need to pay attention to make sure that your application is appropriately completed.
And do you have any specific numbers on how much this costs? I mean, is it different from song to song, or can you copyright like a collection? I've heard something about copyrighting a collection of songs. What if you're just a beat maker and you make beats that people, and you have a copyright on that, people sell it and they have the rights to use it in a certain way? Is there a varied price, or is there like a one price for all each time you copyright it?
I believe at the time we're recording this right now, the one online registration through the ECO costs $35. And you may be able to register more than one sound recording or more than one composition in a single registration. And I know a lot of people that use that approach, particularly people who write large amounts of music. You mentioned a beat maker. If someone's a prolific beat maker, they might make several beats a day. And if they had to file a copyright registration for each individually, it would be cost prohibitive. And it just wouldn't make sense because you'd end up spending thousands potentially in just the filing costs. So there are ways to register more than one work at a time. And if the works are published on the same date and with the same author, then it's definitely possible to do that. But again, you just have to be very careful when filling out the application. And that scenario occurs for photographers as well. While a beat maker might create a dozen beats a day, a photographer might take hundreds of pictures.
Oh, yeah.
So I think for across all different fields within the creative arts, I think it's important that people have kind of a policy in place that they can follow, so they know, okay, if I created this many beats, to get them in some kind of a spreadsheet or have some kind of a way to identify, have I registered these yet or not, and when am I going to do that, and how can I do it as cost effectively as possible to still get the maximum protection.
Okay. And what do you do? What steps do you take if you find out that someone's like stolen your idea? I mean, it's probably the way you find out, I imagine, might be haphazard, but when you actually find out that, hey, you hear it, what steps do you have to take to file a complaint, or how does that work?
Okay. So there's a few ways that people find out that they're infringed. I've had some clients that are notified by a fan. They might get an email from a fan in some obscure city that says, oh, I heard a song that sounds an awful lot like yours, or, oh, I heard your song on this TV show, congrats. And you get this email and you think, I didn't license that song to anyone. Mm-hmm. How on earth could this be on a TV show? So sometimes it's a third party that notifies you. I know there's also some fingerprinting technologies that musicians can use to identify these works online and through every channel on broadcast. And if they sometimes hire these companies to scan all of every broadcast they can to identify these uses. And I've had some clients have their infringements identified that way. But what's most
Prince
important
probably uses that. Prince probably uses yeah, quite a
bit. So I think the most important thing, though, is what you do next. So if you believe you may have been infringed, there's some stuff you need to do right away. You need to put on your lawyer hat and realize I'm going to need evidence of this. Okay, so if I am on a computer and say I find someone selling a song that sounds like mine, I'm going to start taking screen captures. I might buy that song, so I have a copy of it locally stored, so I can show on this date they were selling it, and this is what it sounded like on that date. So if they change their story in the future, I can say at least as of this point in time that was infringing.
Yeah.
If it's a video broadcast, I would store that thing in the DVR as fast as I can. Or if anyone still has VCRs, I don't know, probably not. But some way you need to record that. If that means grabbing your iPhone and snapping video of a television playing your song along with the show, really any way that you can capture the infringement is critical, because this evidence can be fleeting, and if someone doesn't capture it, it might not occur again. So say, for example, it was on obscure radio program or something.
Yeah.
You might not have a way to record it if you don't capture it right now.
Yeah.
So I think people really need to focus on the evidence. And so that's piece number one. I think piece number two is you need to make a record. So now you have this screen capture, or you have this video that you took. You need to write down everything you can about when you found it, how you found it. If someone referred you to this website, write down who it was. Was it by email? Was it by phone? Anything you can to begin to build your case about this particular infringement. I think people need to start writing that down. And as soon as you have this, this screenshot or the infringing MP3, plus this information about where you found it, how you found it, and whether they're selling it for profit, etc., now you're in a place where you should probably contact an experienced attorney. And the first thing that they're going to ask for is all that evidence and that record that you took of how you came across the work. And that's going to save it a lot of time for them to assess whether this likely was an infringement, and they can advise you on what sort of next steps you might need to take.
So my next question, Ian, is, I don't know. Actually, I don't know if this is true or not, but I've heard something about a poor man's copyright, something about putting something in a sealed envelope and sending it to the Library of Congress and throwing salt over your shoulder. I don't really know how that goes, but is there something like that, or is there a lot of common misconceptions about super cheap ways to get copyrights?
I'm so glad you asked this, because I can't tell you how many musicians have come up to me and asked me about the poor man's copyright. It is one of the most pervasive myths out there, and is totally unfounded.
Oh, okay.
Please don't mail yourself a CD and believe that you've got the maximum protection, because that's just not the case. I can understand the logic behind someone saying, oh, I've got a sealed envelope and it's stamped by the post office, therefore I can prove this date of creation. But there's so many other ways you can prove a date of creation. And filing, for one, you could file a copyright registration with the Copyright Office, and that would certainly have a date on it. And that's the one that I recommend. Yeah.
Okay. So is there any other myths besides the sealed envelope sent to yourself, or anything we
Absolutely.
should know about?
Yeah, there's tons. So, for example, another really common question I get is, how much can I copy this other work before I'm crossing a line? And this is something that happens a lot for people who are maybe in television and film music or advertising, and they'll get a video with a temp track and have to figure out, okay, how can I make this my own without crossing a line? And they don't really understand where that line is. And I can totally relate. As a composer, I was put in that difficult position tons of times. And what's really awkward about it is sometimes a director or someone else involved in the project is absolutely in love with the temp track. So you might listen to it, have understand what they were looking for, come up with something totally original, and you'll get a response like, I like what you did, but I'd like it more if it sounded like the temp track. So I think, to answer this question, some of the myths are, I only copied 7 notes, or I only sampled 3 seconds. And these people come up with incredibly specific numbers about notes and seconds for a sample and all this kind of stuff, and it's all nonsense. There is no black and white rule about how much you can copy. And I think that this is the right result. I don't think there should be. Because if there were, it would be up to either lawmakers or judges or someone else to define where creativity starts and ends. So if it was up to someone in Washington to tell me how many notes it takes to be original, that just doesn't resonate at the gut level for me. I think that that's the sort of definition that needs to come from artists, musicians, or at least a jury of their peers.
Yeah.
So the short answer is there's no black and white rule, and I think the takeaway is just use your gut. I mean, if it feels like you're copying somebody, don't do it.
Yeah, because they're going to mostly
more creative than that.
Yeah, exactly. They're going to go off the feeling they get when they listen to it. They're going to be like, "Oh, that kind of sounds like that song that I wrote, or this other song," or they're going to say, "That really sounds like it," And it could be that the sample is the same length, or it could be that the chord progression is the same. But it's, there are so many chord progressions that are reused, and even in mainstream music, I feel like I hear the same song all the time. So maybe they're just infringing on each other constantly, but they don't care, So it's kind of it is.
Well, I mean, to a certain degree, art influences art, and it should, and that's kind of how it progresses. But there's a difference between influencing and stealing someone's work for profit.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of the difficult tightrope that copyright law tries to walk. Is are we protecting creators enough, but are we staying out of the way of the progression of the arts? So I think it's a challenge, and I don't think copyright law is perfect, but I think it's doing the best that it can. So as a composer, as a musician, if you feel like you're infringing somebody, chances are you are.
Okay, and do you recommend that people start copywriting their? I mean, they got that 3-month window, so they start doing it early on in their career. Should they wait? I mean, when should they start really think about copywriting?
Okay, I think if you're a professional musician, then I think you need to approach it that way. Mm-hmm. If you're in the business of creating music, you need to protect that business. Mm-hmm. So I think you should start immediately, and at the very least, take a look at this library of work that you have. If none of it's been protected, then try and come up with the most cost-effective strategies to get that protected, which might mean you could do some group registrations, or maybe there's another approach. And then to also implement a best practice going forward. So everything that you create after watching this video, going forward, you're going to get the maximum protection for it.
Okay. Yeah, because I have a lot of people who watch this show who are singer-songwriters or artists, and they're just in the midst of, constant... I mean, every artist is constantly evolving their music. And in the beginning, they're not... I'm trying to get them more focused on the marketing, and making a living from it. But some of them, they're very focused on the music, and so they don't focus enough on the marketing and the sales and the law end of things. So I just want to get the message out to them that they should really, if they want to make it a career, if they want to make a living from it, then copyright law is an absolute essential. So, your website, iangibson.com, is there a way that people can connect with you and learn more about this stuff beyond this interview?
Absolutely. So on the website, I post, just for those who haven't seen it yet, I post educational material that includes copyright law, includes trademark, other entertainment issues, contract law, really everything that musicians need to know about the legal side of their business. And I post all of it for free. I'm really just trying to spread the word because I'm so tired of having musicians come to me with these awful sob stories, and I do feel for them that maybe they were infringed, or they're being accused of infringement and they just didn't know the law and they got in trouble, or they didn't file that registration and now nobody wants to take their case. And I hear these things all the time, and so I want to do something about it. So that's why I'm spreading the word. So the best way to reach out and stay in contact with me is to join my email list. And you can just go to iangibson.com, and at the top right, there's a box you can add the email list. And also on that website, you can send me questions, legal questions, confidentially. And this is something that I haven't seen any other website do before. So
that's awesome.
without having to identify yourself, you can send me a question and say, I feel like I'm walking the line here. Should I be nervous? And give me a little bit of backstory, and I'll create a public post that addresses the issue if it's something that I think everyone could benefit from hearing, and share that information without you having to identify yourself.
Okay, awesome. And last question: what is your favorite album, and what would your life be like if it never existed?
Oh man, this is way harder than the law questions. I think favorite album. So I listen to music virtually all day long while I work. So it can't be something that has a lot of lyrics that would distract me. Mm-hmm. So one of my go-tos is Sigur Rós.
Okay,
and
there you go.
while it's not purely instrumental music, I have no idea what the guy's saying, so it doesn't distract me.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So I think that's probably an album I couldn't live without.
Okay. Yeah, I can relate to that. I have a whole playlist on Spotify of just instrumental music that I put in the background. It can't be. I can't necessarily do it with jazz, especially if it's bebop, because then it's too much. It's like my mind wants to like zone in on it. It's just too active.
Right.
But so I definitely agree with you there. Almost pulled my headphone out there. So Ian, yeah, thanks for coming on. This is some information that honestly I had no clue about, which is why I connected with you and brought you on. And I'm glad you had the time to come on this show. So thanks again, man.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.
Okay. See you later.
Okay, that wraps up another episode of Seeds of Music. This episode was with Ian Gibson from iangibson.com. Make sure to check out his links. Go to his site. Sign up for his email newsletter to stay up to date with all the new information regarding legal issues or legal tips that you'll need to know to succeed as a musician in a professional career or an independent artist writing songs and getting them copyrighted, or a band, or a producer. Basically anything. If you are doing something with music and you want to be serious about it and pursue it professionally and make money, these are things that you absolutely need to know. So sign up for his email newsletter. You're going to get a free legal checklist from him. And also remember, you can, in addition to that, send him any question you have about anything legal, anything revolving law, and it will be confidential, and he'll answer you right back. And I think that's probably the number one thing that I would take advantage of. So, if you have not signed up for the email newsletter, please do that now. It is the best way to stay up to date with Seeds of Music. If you're watching from YouTube and you're subscribed to that channel but not to the newsletter, make sure to sign up to the newsletter, because the YouTube channel is not the best way to stay up to date. It is through the newsletter. If you felt like you gained something useful, which I hope you did, because I didn't know any of the things that he was talking about, and now I do, and that is such a valuable thing to be a creative in the music field, whether you're writing songs or whatever, to actually understand copyright and really how you're supposed to pursue it, and not mailing yourself a letter with the CD in there and considering that copyright. That in itself is great to actually hear someone debunk that myth. So spread the word. If anything, just for that tip right there, share this interview on Facebook, internet, Reddit, whatever you use. Share love and share the seeds. So lastly, comment on the video. What was your greatest takeaway from the interview? Was it the myth about mailing yourself a copy of your CD or your album? Myth debunking? Was that the greatest takeaway? Or was it something else? Let me know. Just put in your comment in the box at the bottom of the post. And how will you apply what you've learned? Because nothing will happen without you taking action. And lastly, who would you like to see interviewed? Is there someone you would like to see on the show? Just let me know. Send an email to kyle.seedsofmusic@gmail.com. I answer every email. It at the most might take me 2 days, but rest assured I will get to everyone's email that they send me. So, see you in the next video.